Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Psychohistory, written by Uncommonality. The exploration cruiser plummeted through the planet's dense, carbonized atmosphere, breaking the cloud layer in a flash of ionized plasma generated by its entry. The belly flop maneuver began slowing it down faster and faster as the atmosphere became denser. And only a few hundred meters above the surface, it fired an array of descent thrusters, bleeding off the last of its velocity. One of, if not the most efficient ways to land on a planet. A suicide burn, named such because one equipment failure would mean one's doom. However, because the thrusters only fired once for a few seconds instead of through the entire descent, it was preferred method for such a frontier cruiser. Fuel was always a premium around these parts, given the pointed absence of refineries and starlifters. With its landing gear deployed, the cruiser did not even send up any dust as it touched down, slowed to the speed of a falling feather. Soon enough, it had rooted itself to the ledge it was landed upon, extending claws into the soil to hold it in place, and long antennae into the air to break through the cloud cover, and a small lift from its belly, carrying three beings in hazmat suits. The first, a tripodal, point-symmetric Z, was clad in an advanced pressure suit to provide the atmospheric conditions necessary to survive. The second, a bipedal Hmk, was simply wearing a thick jacket with a backpack heater, basking in the comfortable warmth. And the third, a hovering Zer, wore nay, but a breathing mask and a sparking energy field enveloped it, and its levitation chair and an oxygen filter that removed the poisonous element from the nitrogen it breathed. The three quickly began taking soil samples, air samples, dust samples, photographs, and telemetry readings. The planet had been discovered orbiting an aging yellow dwarf, clad in deep white clouds that grew darker and deeper in as the carbon content increased intensity. It carried a strong magnetic field which disrupted any remote viewings, which meant a cruiser was dispatched to the location in order to find out what lay beneath the cloud cover. What the crew discovered was breathtaking. They had landed in a cold, desolate, but awe-inspiring graveyard of steel and concrete. Enormous jagged towers rising from the ash like the grave markers of giants. The cruiser itself perched on one of the more squat and stable ones. They quickly located an entrance to the roof that they had landed upon and moved downwards through the structure. What appeared to be domiciles stacked on top of each other, defying common sense and sensible engineering with how densely packed they were. Perhaps the native species had lived in enormous herds. As the crew moved downwards, recording data, artifacts, and any scraps of writing or language or digital recordings they could find, they found that the tower extended far beneath the ash, with some of the domiciles completely flooded as the windows cracked inwards from the weight. Down here, artifacts were more well-preserved and a wealth of data was gathered. A translation AI began correlating the writing systems with the phonetic engine rendered through depictions of the species. Large, bipedal, symmetric beings that manipulated their environment using dexterous claws and perceived it primarily through light and sound. After a while, they could descend no more. The stairway had ended, and the crew crossed into a small lobby and then sealed blast doors leading, presumably, to the ash-flooded outside. Expeditions such as this can take months, exploring the other towers and the newly discovered subterranean tunnel network, then correlating all the data, visiting other boneyards across the planet, recording yet more data.
"Is the AI ready for analysis?"
asked the Yiz. They'd never been the best programmer of the three. They were back in the cruiser, having been called by its automated systems. "Ready for psychohistorical recreation?" the computer said, its voice pleasant as always.
"Begin then,"
said the Hmk. "Beginning holographic assembly." Each cruiser contained a powerful analysis engine capable of both extrapolation and creativity. It was often used to model a gestalt of a given species, because the engine could use both its data cache and its own quantum analytical properties to extrapolate responses based on the outside stimuli. In essence, it would resurrect a representation of a perfect average of a given species, which was capable of answering questions not apparent from the original set of data. A marvel of engineering, one just taking form now. "We are humankind," said the gestalt, taking the form of one of the bipedal aliens. "Constructed from complex proteins, arranged to unique organs and attached to an endoskeleton of calcium composite," it continued, its face taking the shape of a figuring itself out for a second. "We emerged from a primitive species through a process known as evolution, the selection of beneficial traits which were passed on through replication, while non-beneficial traits were erased from the gene pool. Given enough time, small traits could combine into larger and larger changes, creating a trend of adaptation to any environment over time."
"What is the basis of your existence?"
asked the Yiz, notepad at the ready. "Our bodies are based on a heliacal strand of biological encoded data. Our minds were based primarily on the recognition of patterns in complex systems. Unknowingly, most of our civilization was based around this attribute in turn. Large groups of us would arrange themselves into a facsimile of a single being, akin to a basic fractal, because of this."
"What happened after your emergence as a sapient species?"
asked the Zer. The gestalt would build on itself, meaning it had to be led through topics in a fluid way, connecting back to prior knowledge. "We wandered. All the major continents, save one, were connected at various points throughout our history, leading to total saturation of survivable surface with our species. For countless generations, we hunted other creatures and congregated into small communities. The fractal nature of our minds eventually led to our societal advancement, copying the advancement of our biology, leading to gradual technological improvements across time."
"When did you build the towers we found on your world?"
asked the Yiz. "Late in our history." The gestalt fell silent, waiting expectantly. Some key extrapolation was missing, leading to the engine not being able to determine the most likely correct answer. All three thought in silence before the snapped their fingers.
"What was the pace of your technological advancement?"
"Exponential. As our understanding of our nature grew, we eventually attained a key to short-circuiting the process. We developed a scientific method for determining objective truths and applied it to our technology. The result was a revolution in both its advancement and our industrial capabilities."
"Taking into account this fractal nature, how were scarce resources allocated throughout your society?"
"In our early history, within small groups, resources were allocated as needed, and bartered amongst each other in exchange for other resources. Larger groups would exchange with each other, or raid for resources, or demand control over their neighbors. As our societies grew more complex, the striving force of our psyche became more visible. Greed. Each of us still contained the instincts and drives of our primitive ancestors, driving some to accumulate more resources than they needed. These, naturally, became our leaders, justifying their rule through the use of superstition coincidental enough to pique the interest of our pattern-seeking minds."
"Did this continue forever?"
"Yes and no. As our numbers and technological advancements grew, the fractal nature of our society made itself present once more, leading to the creation of conglomerates of interest that acted upon primitive desires. A conglomerate making profit through one act desired the easing of this act, using its appendages and constituent humans as tools to fulfill this desire. It was through this that the drive for capital replaced the old system of resource allocation, with one where each human could simply acquire what they wanted by exchanging their time for effort for tokens used to barter for said thing.
And did this continue forever?
No. In the last centuries of our history, voices for a change of the system to one favoring human life and happiness became heard, and the system was shackled in parts of our world to both reduce its naturally exploitative nature and guarantee that a human could not exchange time or effort they did not have, would not simply die, as they were denied food and shelter. Sadly, the realization of this new system never came to pass.
Why not?
Because some of the most valuable substances on our world were a group of extremely energy-dense substances that could be ignited to release this energy. It was on these substances that our industry was based, and with our industry part of our resource allocation system, it was mostly controlled by fractal conglomerates executing the simple desire to keep existing and maintain profits. When it came to light that our industry was damaged the ecosphere of our planet, the fractal conglomerates' desire did not change, possessing no kind of foresight. And because almost every human was reliant on them to survive, no individuals could do anything either. Eventually, our planet began dying, and these conglomerates scrambled to repair our ecosphere. But it was too late.
Did any of you survive?
It is unlikely. The sky darkening and the poisoning of our water spelled doom for the majority of our species. It is possible some survived in underground installations, however.
We thank you for your knowledge, humankind. May you rest in peace, said Hunk.
The gestalt disintegrated into photonic flux with a solemn nod. Its structure would be frozen and flashed onto a crystal memory drive. The cruiser slowly, softly retracted its claws from the ground and its antenna from the air before lifting off and using the descent thrusters. Once it was high enough, it flipped in the air and fired its main engine, shooting into the sky northwards. The onboard sensors had been tuned for cavities in the surface, indications of subterranean structures. If any humans survived, perhaps they could be found and rescued. The cruiser scoured the entire surface of the planet over the next few days, finding little but the occasional natural cavern and deserted underground bunker. But it was passed over a small island in the northern hemisphere, the last slice of the planet to be searched. The sensors pinged for one last time. An underground installation, still emanating faint readings of power, lying buried beneath a mountain of ice and snow. Using the ship's main thruster, the crew slowly melted their way through the ice towards their goal, 2 kilometers of ice. A sheer glacier covered much of the northern hemisphere. Eventually, the thruster could do no more, and they knew that they had arrived at its bottom. Using the thruster to carve out a large cavern, their vessel touched down and projected a force field across the artificial hollow and a ways up in the tunnel to the surface to prevent it from collapsing. There was a structure here, a tunnel leading into the hillside, its outer door reinforced and blast-proof. After trying to interfere with it and failing, they simply decided to knock. The door sounded hollow and creaked. From within, a frozen breeze came. It was a lot colder inside the bunker than it was outside, surrounded by glacier. Past the door they found tiny but well-lived complex. Towards the back were doors barred with solid metal, welded shut and bolted to the floors and ceiling. But in what was apparently a lobby of sorts were the first remains that actually found. This human had apparently escaped both the ash and the winter, though only their skeleton remained. Adorning the walls were tally marks, each counting a day. The entire lobby was filled, with the marks extending far into the entrance tunnel. By a cursory glance, the human had survived the end of the world by 50 years. It was in the scattered journals that they found their answers. With the aid of their translator AI, they read through the logs and grew sparser and sparser over time. This human had apparently been an employee in the structure known as the Seed Vault. They received an order to lock the door and not open it until they received an all clear, which obviously never came. After 10 years, they'd opened the door once, only to find a frozen, darkened hellscape outside. The journals detailed the descent into depression, then momentary insanity, then grim resolve. They vowed to protect the treasure for as long as they were able. The Yiz immediately began unsealing doors leading deeper into the complex at that. The human eventually became sick and knew that they would not live long, so they did everything they could to keep the doors shut, and then rerouted the power devoted to life support into the treasure chamber. Without this act, whatever was down there would have likely been destroyed hundreds of years ago. With a shout of triumph, the Yiz returned from the unsealed door.
Unspoiled, it's all still intact, somehow, miraculously alive.
Once the crew members managed to calm them down, they explained,
This complex was designed to hold examples of nearly every plant that once existed on this world. Using cryogenics, these seeds were put to sleep, waiting to be planted in fertile soil. We can resurrect this world. At least some version of it.
Over the next several years, traffic into the system increased steadily. A Dyson ring was constructed around the yellow dwarf, harvesting radiant energy for use in Project Earth. One of the largest and most intensive terraforming projects ever attempted. Enormous freighters combed the atmosphere of the third planet for ash and pollutants, allowing it light of its parent star to touch the surface for the first time in centuries. Ozone had seeded into the upper atmosphere, creating a filter for ultraviolet light, which a biological analysis had revealed would be toxic to the keystone of the project. The surface itself was combed over. Most of the ash dispersed evenly onto land masses and was irrigated using slowly melting ice caps, forming extremely fertile soil. And when all this was all finished, the seeds from the vault, studied and grown and replicated, were planted across the entire surface. Within a single generation, the lifeless grey-blue surface had become a vibrant green-blue, an ascent flora cleaning up the last of the atmosphere, creating one of the most oxygen-dense environments in the galaxy. Planet Earth had become a memorial and a museum. On its surface, inside a certain bunker, a gestalt wearing the cloned body of a bipedal, symmetric, tall species of a protein helix-based organic tends to a small outpost, serving as both the museum and the rest stop for travelers. And during the times when nobody comes by, the gestalt known as humankind wanders the increasingly noisy forests, meadows, shrublands, savannas, tundras, overgrown boneyards, and rainforests of Earth, cataloging strange animals and insects lured from dormancy below the surface by the promise of food, sun, air, and life. And it smiles to itself. End of story. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons, Dragzoon WRE, Quantum Wednesday, Ambrose Cattell, Lord Ashrakul, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.